So perfect. So we can learn from each other to better the business of college athletics. I'm excited we've been successful in bringing the strategic vision to life and look forward to more intentional partnerships in the future. I encourage everyone to take advantage of summer convention and check out other associations programming so we can all grow and learn together on opportunities for collaboration. Today's session might seem like a wild pairing, but it's like pineapple on your pizza or spicy jam and goat cheese. It just works. Athletic financial professionals and collegiate licensing professionals have a lot in common and share many of the same goals. Thank you to Tim and his awesome leadership team for being so easy to work with and open to making this joint effort possible. Thank you to ICLA Shelley Terry for heading up ICLA's educational committee and for stewarding this collaboration into existence. Last but not least, thank you to Nick and Josh. You are the wind beneath our wings. We could not do what we do without you. Before we kick things off today, I'd like everyone to take a quick poll. Josh, Nick, if we could get that first poll. Imagine Jeopardy music is taking place right now. All right, whenever you're ready, or whenever you feel like we have a good cross section of responses, pop that up there. Nick. Ooh, 84%. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Well, so by the end of today, or by the end of this year, especially at summer convention, we're hoping to get those numbers to 100%. We're hoping to get those percentages to 100%. It is now my pleasure to introduce Kyle Pope from Texas A&M, who's serving as today's moderator. He'll lead us off today with a quick overview of licensing. As my friend Zac Efron says, we're all in this together. Kyle?
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. So if you don't mind, go to the next slide. I wanted to start the licensing part of this webinar off with a few images. So the fans in these images have at least one thing in common, and that's passion for their university. One of our primary jobs in licensing is to find ways to offer a variety of merchandise that is authentic to the brand they love and allow our fans to show off their favorite school. Next slide, please.
Their voices as well.
There are a few misconceptions about licensing and what we do. First, some people think that licensing only involves logos. While we do a lot of work with logos, we deal with a wide range of intellectual property issues, such as word marks, trade dress, copyrights, international, federal, and state registrations, common law rights, just to name a few. Another misconception is that licensing is only reactive. Again, there are times when our only choice is to react to a situation. However, we'd prefer to work off of a plan that we've strategically developed with university stakeholders. Also, that internal orders or giveaway items don't need to be produced by licensees. If a product is being produced with the university's IP, then the licensing group should be going through the correct process. Also, that licensing directors just want companies to be licensed to get money. So I'm not going to lie, royalties are great. However, there are a number of other reasons why it's important to work with licensed vendors. Through the licensing process, we're able to vet companies. For instance, we're making sure that their manufacturing process and product quality meets the university standards, and that they have sufficient product liability insurance to protect the university. And last, that licensing directors only review artwork. Reviewing artwork is an important part of what we do, but it's not the only thing, and I'll touch on a few more of those things in the next slides. So one easy way to think about what we do is to remember the 4 Ps: protect, promote, preserve, and profit. We protect the brand by ensuring that we're licensing the right companies, produce merchandise bearing our IP, that we're stopping unauthorized uses of our IP, and that we're registering our IP internationally, federally, and with our state. We promote the brand through things like experiential marketing, digital ads, social media promotions, optimizing search, and other methods. We preserve our brand by using historical marks in a controlled way with the right context through college vault programs or vintage programs. And finally, profit. We're looking to maximize the licensing revenue in order to support a variety of university initiatives. A lot of time that revenue is used to provide scholarships to students. Another interesting point that we found out through recent ICLA surveys is that licensing is generally housed within university's marketing communications department, athletics, or auxiliary services. Licensing can be housed in other parts of the university as well, but those were the three most common areas. But regardless of where licensing is housed, it affects all parts of campus. For instance, we're involved in brand updates and logo refreshes, facility renovations, development and sponsorship initiatives, university contracts like sideline agreements and coaches contracts, campus retail and in-venue merchandise concessions, experiential marketing, and many more. Basically, if the university's IP is involved, involve us because we can help. Next slide, please. So along those lines, here are a few trends that we've seen affect our industry in recent years. I'm sure we all remember the NFT craze, and while that didn't exactly turn out the way we thought it would, I still think there's ways to incorporate that technology and enhance the fan experience and the affinity for the brand. So this is one example of how Kansas worked with McCleary to utilize NFT technology following their national championship last year. Next, in the middle, we have NIL, which we're all familiar with. NIL will continue to be important for many years. However, how the university is used within NIL will continue to keep us all busy. And finally, there have been a number of schools who've created consumable products like the one shown here. Sometimes those consumable products have included a sponsorship or supported university research programs like the Center for Coffee Research and Education here at Texas A&M. Now I'll kick it over to Ashlee to talk about the business office.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited about this topic because while I do sit in the business office, I've been able to work directly with licensing for several years at a few institutions to some degree. So fun to go through this with everyone. So we'll hop right in. What people think the business office does. I've heard all of these things. You know, we pay bills, they reimburse me, we collect money. We tell people no, that's a big one, or we make things harder or kill trees. While some of those are all true to some degree, that's actually not our duties. So we'll hop down to what we actually do. Next slide, please. Yeah. So one of the main things that we really try to focus on in the business office for athletics is getting to yes. Although we might have to tell you no about how something gets done, we can help keep people out of trouble as far as, you know, policy and procedure. So making sure that, you know, we go over that with you ahead of time and really try to get to yes, no matter what we're doing. Another thing is building strong relationships. You know, focusing within athletics, we're one of the units within sports that work with every sport and every unit. Because if you're going to spend money, you need the business office. So that's a unique thing with the business office as compared to some other units that may not work with every single sport and every single other unit. Across campus, we work with accounts payable, the cashier's office, controller's office, budget office, financial reporting, general counsel, which is the lawyers, and board of trustees. And then outside of athletics, we also work with vendors and auditors and partners and other stakeholders. You know, sometimes we might get calls from fans about different things or parents about scholarships. So we're having to work with a lot of different people across the entire university and the athletic department. Accounts payable, that is where we are paying bills and we are reimbursing you. So getting things paid, and then accounts receivable, collecting the money, you know, that's where it also crosses over with licensing, making sure that we are bringing in revenue and booking that appropriately. We do budget development, how we bring in the revenue, and then how we plan to spend it from an annual basis on each unit and each sport within athletics. Contracting, you know, that could have to do with, you know, sports apparel agreements, which overlap with licensing, or it could be game contracts and hotel contracts as well. And then purchasing and travel management, you know, we're making sure that our teams get to the right places, they have the right clothes on their back, they're fed, all those things that, you know, you have to purchase has to come through the business office as well. We're also responsible for policy and procedures, just like the compliance office. You know, we're having to tell you no because there's a state policy or a federal policy against that sometimes. So making sure we understand that in the business office, but also that the staff that are trying to get things done understand those policies and procedures too. We deal with tax regulations, financial reconciliation, reporting, and projections. That has a lot to do with just letting people know what money they have left for the year, how they're going to spend it, or what revenue is coming in, so we can project for the year and understand where we're going to end up. And then financial audits, a fun, really fun topic that we have to, deal with outside auditors to make sure that everything is, documented appropriately, it's booked appropriately, we're spending our money appropriately. So, there's financial, integrity about what we're doing. The last is financial, or second to last, records and management. That's really just filing, scanning, making sure we have things if they're audited later. And then auxiliary business operations. This again is where we get into the weeds with licensing of ensuring that finances are handled properly across the department, whether that's the development office with bringing in gifts, concessions, merchandise, sponsorships, the ticket office, special events, making sure that cash and credit card payments are being handled appropriately. And, everything's kind of buttoned up. We're sort of the more buttoned up people. The licensing is the funner side of the house often, and that's where I really love getting into this. And my role is being able to do both. And it's been fun learning a lot about licensing over the years as well. Next slide. In short, if you spend money or collect money, you need the business office. I don't know if everyone knows this reference. It is getting a little dated now, but Jerry Maguire, show me the money. If you need money, come on down and meet us. Let us help you understand how to get things done. Next slide. So budget considerations and current trends. You can see here on my slides, a lot of the pictures are our student athletes. That's our number one why. I think we all agree with that. We all understand that, but sometimes it can get lost, especially in the business office when we don't work directly with them. So it's good for the business office folks to be reminded of that, making sure we're here for the student athletes, number one, and then also staff experience. Are we paying our staff well? Are we, providing great benefits? Are we having, fun social interactions with them that they're enjoying the experience too? Competitive advantage. Obviously, we all want to compete for a conference or national championships. So how do we make sure that the funding can align with those goals? Title IX compliance is gender equity. Making sure that we're providing equitable funding across the department and experiences for both men's and women's sports. And then sustainability. Is there enough money to get through this year and future years? That's a big one, especially post-pandemic, where a lot of our budgets were cut or staffs were reduced, making sure that we can help from a funding standpoint meet our goals over the year as a department. Specific expense challenges that we have to, look at from a business side. NCAA and conference legislation, there's a lot, especially like food deregulation many years ago. We were opened up to what else we could pay for, which was great from a student athlete perspective. But then on the funding side, many schools, might struggle with how to fund for that. So making sure we balance those. Scholarships, obviously the cost of tuition, room and board, cost of attendance goes up each year at most institutions. So paying attention to that and how we fund it as well. Salaries and benefits. Hopefully, our institutions are providing raises annually. Obviously not always, especially in the last several years with the pandemic, but how do you fund that? If your revenue sources especially are not being increased along with that. General inflation, especially on travel, food, and apparel, those costs continue to rise. So, the business office is really in all of those conversations with, we want to do these things, but how do we fund them and balancing that? Name, image, and likeness, that really ties in with us from a fundraising perspective. And, we're all still sort of trying to figure this out. What effect will it have on fundraising, and sponsorships? Will people who donate to NIL stop donating directly to athletics, or are they going to do both? We're still kind of looking at the data to see how that affects each level of institution and each institution across the board. And then solutions and opportunities. Two things that we really try to focus on, or three: cost efficiencies, making sure we are trying to leverage things to get the best deal. That's where contracting and planning with the business office can come in. That's a lot of times why they're asking you to get multiple quotes. We want to make sure we get a great price on that t-shirt giveaway, not just going with the first vendor that might be more costly. And then revenue growth, again, focusing with licensing in mind. How do we grow those retail licenses and royalties to be able to fund the rest of our programming as well, or scholarships, as Kyle mentioned earlier. And then value add approach, making sure that every dollar matters. We shouldn't just spend money to spend money or just because we always have. Really thinking about how are we spending money? Why are we spending it that way? And then making decisions out of that. And challenges and tips for working with the business office. So a few things that we do focus on from a challenges perspective is funding. There never seems to be enough money. Everyone can agree to that. There isn't a sport in the world that will say, yes, I have enough. Education, business staff, we have to learn a lot. As you saw on the prior slides, there's a lot of different things we have to know as a staff, and then being able to teach others. A lot of the times where the staff we're working with across the units in sports don't have business experience. So how do you make sure that they understand what's needed from a financial standpoint from them? Campus entities, understanding athletics, a lot of them either don't know, don't care, or don't realize what all goes into athletics. So helping them understand who we are, why we do what we do. The sense of urgency is different than maybe other places on campus that don't have to operate and travel like we do. So helping them understand who we are. Athletic staff with various levels of expertise, experience, and interest. You know, I've got coaches who really love budgeting, and I've got coaches who are like, I don't care, I'm not doing this, I don't want to do this. So we have to be able to work with all of those folks and figure out a way to be successful. And sense of urgency and poor planning. A lot of it just comes down to making sure the business office is included early on. You know, a lot of times we get things last minute, as I'm sure licensing probably does as well. You know, we need this t-shirt in the bookstore tomorrow. That's not really realistic. You know, tell us 6 months ago and we can get this done. It's the same with the business office. So the sooner you go to work with them, the easier. So tips on working with the business office, particularly from a licensing standpoint, get to know the business office staff. We are nice people. We aren't going to bite your head off. We're not going to yell at you for the most part. We're not, you know, going to be mean. We're not going to say no for the most part, unless there's really a reason that we can't get something done. We'll help you understand it. We'll walk you through it. We'll figure out a solution. Get to know the business basics of your institution, you know, getting to know the business office, they can help you walk through that, what is applicable, what isn't in the situation of whatever you're trying to get done. Plan ahead and communicate clearly, what are the needs, what are the timelines, you know, what funding might need to be available. And then the last is really something that came up at a prior institution I worked at. We were constantly called a roadblock. And I finally came up with a great response that was, we're not a roadblock, we're a yield sign. We're going to slow things down a little bit to make sure we don't crash into the highway. You know, you're going to yield as you're getting on the highway. That's the same thing that the business office does. We're slowing things down a little bit to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and things are kind of buttoned up, that they can successfully get through the entire kind of process without roadblocks down the road. You know, sometimes, especially with licensing, if you do it right, no one will know that something went wrong. Whereas if it doesn't end up in the bookstore on the time that you said it was going to end up there, then it looks bad because people can see the end result. Our goal is to make sure that no one knows everything that's going on, you know, behind the scenes. It should just look like it got done flawlessly. So if you work with the business office, we can help you do that. And I am going to pass it off to Kimberly Spino from Indiana University.
Hey everyone, great to be here. And I guess I'll just start out with just some of my background. We can go ahead to the next slide. So I started my career in collegiate licensing after graduating undergrad. It really started in collegiate athletics. Took over some of the responsibilities there in licensing when I worked at Sam Houston State in Huntsville, Texas for several years. And then I moved on to the University of Texas system and worked there for about 6.5 years before landing my role here at IU. I started last May, and my office is housed under business partnerships, not in athletics, but we do try to have a very strong line of communication with athletics, along with some others, including purchasing, procurement, of course, our general counsel, university marketing communications, and some others. So IU consists of 9 campuses overall across the state of Indiana. You can see there just the variety of different marks we use that are utilized by our athletic programs. The IU Trident is what we call it, represents IU Bloomington. And then we have a variety of other mascot marks that are utilized by their other regional campuses. So we house the licensing program for all of these regional campuses as well. Campus education is really a big component of what we do as part of our role, and that encompasses for all units, including student groups, alumni association, and then of course athletics, and working with coaches and equipment managers. So the hot topic I think I'm going to mostly highlight here today, I think this can resonate with just about any institution that's represented on this call, regardless of your size or affiliation of conference, is, the purchase of promotional items and some of the challenges that we face. And I think that in a way we are allies to our business offices for several reasons. So really one of the main challenges we receive from licensing standpoint is last minute requests. I'm sure many of you can attest to that, and how we handle that. And so, I'm sure the business office handles or has similar last minute requests, and it's not always easy to navigate, and it's not always a simple yes or no answer. So sometimes we have to dig a little deeper or get a few more approvals along the way in order for something to come to fruition. So that's definitely a challenge that we face. And then items really to consider, particularly when we're working with marketing teams, is, the dollars, the budget, how much they're spending on promotional items. I think one of the challenges that we face as licensing directors is, finding that healthy balance between promotional items versus retail, and ensuring that we're not giving away so much to the point where it affects our retail sales. And so often the questions or, concerns that we want to call out is when they are wanting to give away a large quantity or amount of items, particularly at athletic events. We have to ask the question of how that's going to impact our retailers, particularly your in-venue team stores. And I have found a little bit of success with politely reminding departments, particularly in marketing, that that the large quantity of giveaways, particularly in apparel, t-shirts, can affect the team store sales. And it would be as a courtesy to them to ensure that they know when these promotions are going on, so that they have a heads up that there's the potential of a lower, less inventory sold, basically. So that's one of the main challenges that we face, I think. And I think that in that respect, we are an ally to our business office, because we are challenging units to spend efficiently and spend wisely. And, to keep in mind that when we are giving away that promotional apparel and headwear, that it does impact the retailer dollars. And for IU in particular, a large portion of our revenue, royalty revenue, goes back to athletics. So of course, the more that's sold, the more dollars we bring in, and then the more athletics gets to recoup. So I know that every school is a little different, and not all schools' revenue goes directly to athletics, but for us, a large portion of it does. So we always try to keep that in mind when we're having conversations with our marketing team in athletics, and when they want to give away promotional items. So that's really just the big highlight that I have to offer here, or topic to offer here for today's discussion.
All right, it looks like I'm up next, Greg Berkowitz and I, from the University of Minnesota. So I work on the business side. I'm the CFO here at Minnesota Athletics, and this year's president for CABMA. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we have worked together at Minnesota with the business office and licensing. So coming into Minnesota, I had a little bit of prior familiarity with licensing, working through an RFP process on for our licensing agency at the University of Colorado. So I really, like Ashlee said, it's fun for us people in the business office to kind of branch out and get involved on the external side, and I enjoyed that project at Colorado, learning about licensing. So shortly after I started here, I was assigned to oversee our licensing director, and so it was really fun to learn about the kind of a little bit more about the day in, day out work that he did and some of the trends in the industry. And then pretty quickly into during my time here working with him, we looking at our contracts and recognized that we had some important contracts expiring in the near future with our retail partner for in-venue and online, as well as our licensing agency. And also at the same time, we happened to have some really good discussions with some longtime licensing industry experts and learned about some opportunities that they recommended to look at our licensing program kind of from a strategic standpoint and tie that in with the RFP process that we were going to be starting. So yeah, we were looking at that. We spent a lot of time on it, and shortly after we started those processes, our licensing director left the university, but then fortunately we were able to hire Greg Berkowitz shortly after that, and so we've been very, very fortunate to have Greg. He proved to be the kind of the perfect, well-rounded skill set to help us through a very time-intensive and complex process from a legal and financial standpoint to work through those RFPs. So again, from a business perspective, I felt like it was a really good opportunity to collaborate, to utilize our skills, kind of bring both of our skill sets to the table. And RFPs in general are always a really good chance to collaborate and work with whoever it's impacting in the department. So that's another tip, is to always take the time to dive deep on those RFPs, and they only come up every 3 to 5 or 7 years. So it's important to put the time in. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg to talk more about the process here that we went through at Minnesota, but it's been really fun working with him, and then our senior associate AD over external, Mike Wiersbicki. So Greg, go ahead and take it over from here.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Yes, like Tim mentioned, or I guess I should introduce myself. But for those who don't know me, my name is Greg Berkowitz, and I'm Director of Trademark Licensing here at Minnesota. And I've been here for a little more than 3.5 years now. And like Tim said, I probably entered the process right after the education part. Mike and Tim, Mike is my direct supervisor who oversees external affairs at Go for Athletics. Started on the background in education by speaking to CLC and some of the licensing industry leaders. I came around internal evaluation. I think my major role in this was to figure out what is the value of the University of Minnesota's licensing program, in terms of revenue, opportunity, retail relationships, market. And so to figure that out, I really had to speak with folks in athletics, people at the university, our retail partners, our in-venue partnership, alumni, and and also go through all the data that CLC provides us in our licensing agreement, in our agency deal, to figure out, what dollar makes sense for us. Once we got that number, then we came to proposal phase, where we sat in on presentations for different partners for both our retail relationships and then our strategic apparel program, and trying to see where, what the difference was. Was trying to figure out, can we find a place between where we are now and what we think we can go in terms of evaluation of our program. And we finally settled on a couple of partners for our athletics retail groups. Went with Fanatics in-venue and online for the athletics partnership, which is separate from our independent bookstore. And for strategic apparel program, we went with the Hanes Brands and Fanatics Apparel. And so once we picked those partners, then began the negotiation phase. Because as mentioned before, it's not just about the dollars. It's about who's going to support us consistently, who's going to support our retailers with marketing dollars, partnerships, who's going to support our sideline partner, Nike. That was a huge, honestly, that was a major point for us, is we want to make sure that what retail partnership we went with was going to uplift the Nike product in our market, because we just kept getting knocked out from fans that they wanted to see more for Nike. Internships for students, other collaborations, with NIL. That's where we came to the negotiation phase. Then came the execution. This is where we brought in all different folks across campus. So we first started off with just athletics with me and Tim and Mike, but eventually we looped in general counsel, our facilities team, university relations, who's the campus marketing folks here, to really evaluate all these agreements, from their standpoint. I would never recommend you do 3 RPs in the same year, but I'd say it gave us the opportunity to really look at the foundation of our program and where can we go from here. And I wouldn't say we started from scratch, but we did kind of had a soft reset in our licensing program. And so then came the implementation. And so now we're about 2 to 3 years in with both our Fanatics apparel agreement and our Fanatics retail agreement, our strategic apparel agreements, and we renewed the CLC. We currently have, bi-weekly meetings with both Fanatics apparel and Hanes brands. We have monthly meetings with Fanatics e-commerce and venue, both separate. We have bi-weekly calls with CLC, and these opportunities to bring up new ideas and to engage where the process is and how things are going. And I'm happy to report that for the past 2 years, we've had a record-breaking years for our licensing program. And so I say this not to say, Pam, go here, Fanatics go here. That's not what this is about. But I do encourage everyone to go through the process themselves and really evaluate it. And you have to do what's best for you. And so this is an opportunity to say, hey, Prime Pro is a solution. But we did want to explain how we got to the point where we were. And it wasn't just, a money grab or just down the line, but there were other points we had to take in consideration because, like Ashlee said before, we're doing this all for the students. And our job is bringing revenue to support our student athletes from a service standpoint, go for athletics. But when students go buy product, when students go to the stadium for event experience, it really is all about them. But that was really kind of our process going through it, and it just was kind of a unique opportunity to really look at the foundation of the licensing program. Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Anything I missed?
No, I would just, I guess just a couple of quick things to add add on to what Greg had said is, the RFPs were very time consuming and the contracts and obviously the implementation from his end, but there was, a number of key relationships that we had to invest a lot of time in with the campus bookstore and some other local longtime retail relationships. And so those are kind of the key ones, university relations, and just so there was a kind of a long, tedious process to work through those, understand their priorities, and at the end of the day, we kind of came up with a kind of a customized solution that we felt we could play to the strengths of all parties, and so that was our goal, and we felt like it's been a success. So.
Yeah. And I'll say this is that since that was my first year, we've taken this kind of process, we applied to other kind of long-term agreements, including our sideline deal. And so this came to be a kind of a good formula for us, how licensing the business office and other folks on campus can collaborate together. We all have different objectives, but the same goal at the end.
So we are going to kick it over to Ashlee now for the next segment.
One of the things in my history was working at Providence College. I did oversee licensing for athletics. So I am in a little bit of a unique situation where I did hold duties in both, and not everyone does have that. Sometimes, as Greg mentioned, you have that dedicated person or a team of people. Some schools don't have anyone dedicated. So I'm going to go over a little bit about the 3 institutions where I had something to do with licensing, just to show you that it's possible at any school to do something. So really making sure that, kind of understand what's going on at your school and then where you could go with it. You don't have to be the Power 5 and have 3 or 4 people focused on this. You can do it in bits and pieces with whoever has some time and has some interest. So at Providence, there's the breakdown there. I won't go through it, but there were 4 of us that had some sort of hand in licensing. Air Force, there was 4 of us as well that had some sort of hand in licensing. And then Greensboro, there's 3 of us here now. I would say about Providence, we were more of a growing licensing. They were doing some things, but we weren't where we wanted to be. Air Force Academy was pretty well established with their licensing program. And then Greensboro, we're here in our infancy stage. I started last summer. I haven't had that much time to focus on it in this first year, and going into next year, we're really excited to see where we could take this. So I'm going to focus mostly on Providence College because I was there for 5 years, 4 of them doing some licensing things, and we'll go through kind of what we did to grow that. Next slide, thank you. Growing licensing for the Friars. So how it started in around 2005, I started 2014, 2015, we had just won a national hockey championship. Basketball was, making the tournament, ended up being 7 or 8 years in a row, hockey as well. And then soccer had gone to the Sweet 16, track was doing really well with these really great teams. And we were growing our brand nationally. So we were thinking about branding, how do we grow that? And then how do we also grow revenue? We didn't have any dedicated staff, as I mentioned on the one before. It was a little bit of pieces of different folks. We had the procurement officer was actually doing the artwork approvals. I had 0 experience. I just knew things were sold and somehow it ended up in the bookstore. I had no idea how it got there. Our marketing team knew a little bit. They had connected with CLC. So they had learned a bit and were trying to work on some things. And then the trademarks were being managed by general counsel. So, we didn't have anyone who really knew all the elements of licensing, but we had some people who were interested. And then there was limited collaboration between procurement, athletics, and bookstore. We actually almost had an issue where the national championship logo was going to use the Friar head and not the skating Friar. Would have been a massive issue for us. They weren't educated enough on the athletics logos about which to use. Luckily, it was caught before we ended up winning and these retail items got in the marketplace. So, there was very limited exposure between the two. And then the bookstore as well. We weren't really talking to each other about, what items we'd like to see in the bookstore. And then athletics, like I mentioned, have very limited understanding, myself included. I credit everything I know to CLC, Shelley, my friend Sunny out now at NC State, people in the industry who really helped me out to learn, and particularly CLC, their staff was wonderful to just give it to me kindergarten style. Like, I know nothing, let's start from the very beginning. And they were fantastic to walk me through it. We also had focused on intentional changes. The first was volunteering to take it on. I really wanted to learn something new, do something more creative, had some time. The business office was in a really good place as far as our staffing and our time that we had available. So I had that, interest, and then I had the dedicated time to give to it. Also, next, intentionally learned about the industry, the available resources, what can we do? We met with the procurement director. What is artwork? How do you get these artworks? How does, a retailer get it in there? Met with CLC and other licensing colleagues, like I mentioned, and then attending the annual CLC seminar. All 3 of the schools I've worked at are partners with CLC, so it's been very helpful for me to go to those seminars and learn more about it, connect with retailers, just learn the basics, and then, kind of expand on that knowledge over the years. And then really discussing the willingness to collaborate. That, I think, is number 1. If people aren't willing to work together, you're dead in the water. So making sure that, whether it's your marketing team or the bookstore or procurement or whoever's, working on licensing at a school that might not have those dedicated is even more important, because you have to know that you're going to make time to do it and get together, talk it through, share information, and figure out how it works for you. And then procurement, bookstore, CLC, building those relationships with them, and then focusing on time of what we can do and where we want to take it. And then setting goals and dedicated time, which I've now repeated like 3 times about time. So I'll stop talking about time. How it's going now. So some of this was when I was still there, the majority of it. And then the last one, we started, putting the groundwork. We did streamline the branding. We did move to that friar head. One of the things I'm most proud of is that people are now starting to recognize the friar head by itself. It doesn't say Providence anymore. And that was one of our goals, is really making that brand recognition nationally. Showing it like the Michigan M, you don't have to say you're Michigan. People know that that's the M. We wanted to do that with the friar head as well. And it's, you know, it's starting to get there. I'm really proud when we're watching games and the friar head is on that court, or I just see that logo, because we did a lot of really intentional work to move towards that. We also increased licensing revenue over the time I was there. I believe they've still increased it. They've continued success with all of their sports programs and growing the brand. Growing brand exposure, which I talked about. We added the Friar gear regionally to Target and Walmart. URI was in the stores, but we weren't. No one really knew how to do that. So we connected the dots and got in touch with the right people to be able to do that. We expanded the women's and kids options in the bookstore, assisted with the bookstore redesign to really highlight. We had gone in the first year I was there, we had gone to a sideline team apparel with Nike, and we really wanted to highlight those items in the bookstore, and they worked with us on redesigning the bookstore to do so. We increased promotion of retail goods on the athletic social media account. So we were, you know, athletics was directly supporting that push for retail. And then coordinating retail options for Pink Out. Like Greg mentioned too, or Kimberly, I think at the beginning, we were giving away a lot of stuff. We were giving away Pink Out shirts to, it felt like the whole arena when I got there. You know, in the business office, it always feels like too much. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we just spent that much on these. We wanted to connect the dots, and then we moved to an idea that the students were going to have the giveaway and the rest of the, you know, fan base could buy the t-shirt, and we made sure that we synced up with the bookstore to be able to do that. And then added the availability of men's basketball team apparel. We were trying to also do it for men's hockey. That didn't get done while I was there. Hopefully it has since, but being able to have that team apparel, especially at a brand like us, where we were that mid-major Big East, you know, people are really interested in it and they don't understand why it's not available in the bookstore. A lot of it was just lack of communication. Once we kind of connected the dots, we were able to do that and get that planning going earlier. And then the last thing that was really fun to work on was the retail collection for College Vault. You know, we had a lot of really great vintage logos that people were interested in, but no retail option to do so. We started laying the groundwork for that. Homecoming 2020, that fall, was supposed to be Providence's first homecoming. Obviously, everything got canceled with the pandemic. It did not roll out, but they were able to roll it out, you know, in 2022. So, you know, personally, I love just being able to see that and know that that ended up being sold. Was really cool to see those logos out there. And again, this was all stuff that we did with, you know, 5 to 10% of our time in our day. It was not any dedicated time to it. You are able to make a lot of strides with it if you focus a little bit of time and get with the right people on it. One thing that we'll go through, I won't go through all these because I just kind of described it, but it's really, these are kind of the things to think about when you're ramping up licensing efforts, when you don't have that dedicated person. You know, understand the basics, the available resources, trademarks, and really, you know, being familiar with what's available. What are the branding guides? Are they right? Do you want to change them? Obviously, you know, focus on doing that first. If, you know, you want to expand that retail, make sure it's the right logos and what you want to highlight. And then partnering with the retail, that willingness to collaborate, again, is number one to me. If one, you got to understand what you're doing, and two, you've got to have that buy-in. And then growing the core tenets of licensing. I did steal this from ICLA, so I'll just repeat it, you know, focusing on brand development, brand protection, and brand management. Those are kind of those core tenets. So having, you know, the right things in place to be able to work on each of those, who's going to do what and how can we move it forward. I guarantee you, no matter what your situation today, you can improve it 10%, 20%, 25%. Any other, you know, kind of resources available, or the revenue itself, because the exposure sometimes is even as important as that revenue of just having it available. So I hope you guys, you know, whoever is sitting out there wondering, oh my gosh, can we do this? You absolutely can. Just, you know, get in touch with the right people and educate yourself. And I know a year from now, you could be at a better situation. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Yes, so our second poll is next. So we'll give it a few minutes to have the poll brought up and then for people to answer. All right. So contracts, revenue increases 71%, followed by contracts. Perfect. Thank you all for doing the poll. I think next we're going to open it up to questions. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will we'll start getting to those and answering them. So the first question is for the group. What's the most overlooked area that you think would benefit from a business office and licensing collaboration?
I can chime in. I would say one area, and me and Tim actually doing a pretty good job on this, but I think some of the kind of low hanging fruit is collaboration between the licensing and the sponsorship sides. I understand that some schools do outsource it to a leader field, but those guys still kind of report into the athletic structure. There is like a fine line between giving someone access to logos and trademarks for manufacturing products and then using assets for marketing purposes on the sponsor side, but there is some overlap. For example, we just signed a licensing deal with one of our local grocery stores, Cub Foods, to make baked goods, but they're also a sponsor, and so we're finding ways to kind of collaborate that. So I'd recommend if you're a licensing person, reach out to the business office, see what sponsors they have listed out, and then vice versa. If you're on the business office, we have the licensing person, hey, what licensing vendors can we would benefit from some kind of sponsorship arrangement.
Yeah, I would just add, like, make sure that you're talking about goals and whether it's from a revenue standpoint or exposure standpoint, and just trying to identify what you think is possible or what the hurdles are from getting, growing on the revenue or exposure or other areas that you want to grow. Because I think once you're just intentional about that, then you can start identifying actions where, different people can bring different relationships on campus to the table, or, different skill sets to kind of break things down and break down the steps to get there. Whether it's, setting revenue growth goals and, and realistically, what do we need to grow in each area of our licensing program to get there? Just trying to break things down, I would say, is my thought.
Great. The next question is for Kimberly. You've worked in licensing departments housed in athletics and on campus. Do you feel there are differences depending on where you're housed?
I do. I think, I guess starting my career in collegiate athletics and being part of that world, you learn obviously a lot of things a lot more quicker being a part of that department. And then now being out of that department, there are things that I've learned much later or through a press release versus maybe a staff meeting that could potentially affect trademarks and licensing. But I think the way that we are really trying to tackle that is to just have open lines of communication and standing meetings with athletics. We meet with marketing separately. I think at least every other month. And then we also have monthly calls with both athletics and Legends, which is their team store, on a monthly basis as well. So I think just how we communicate with athletics now that I'm not in athletics is really key to making sure that relationship stays strong.
Great, thank you. So Jennifer had a question for the business office. What type of data do you collect that might help the licensing office grow its retail product placement outside of the local market?
You know, I guess like one of the things that just comes to mind probably doesn't directly answer it, but with the, you know, various licensing contracts, there can be opportunities to get capital commitments or marketing commitments built into those deals that, you know, so I think at the end of the day, those may impact the royalties and but, you know, I think that's just trying to look at how you can leverage the resources of all parties. You know, CLC does a great job of pulling data on, you know, where transactions are occurring, where purchases are occurring, so that can help really help from a licensing and marketing standpoint where to focus efforts. But I think licensing may be able to answer that question a little bit better than us.
I would actually say, I would agree with Tim that, you know, a lot of the data we have isn't going to support licensing and where to sell or anything like that. But CLC was a great resource for us, just like that, to, you know, find out where are our fans, where are they living, what kind of, you know, discretionary income do they have, things like that was great from CLC's databases. And then we actually had a lot of conversations between marketing, making sure that I knew and could relate to CLC and relate to the procurement officer. What was Twitter saying? Like, what did these fans say when we did, you know, a lot of it with the team gear specifically, we were getting in a lot of trouble on Twitter when, you know, we're posting all these wonderful pictures about the team gear that basketball and hockey are getting. And the fans were like, okay, where can I get it? Oh, this is ridiculous. Why can't we buy it? Like, I want that shirt. So that was really good for us to connect with marketing. So it wasn't a data point as far as a number, but it was a data point of collecting those comments and what did people want? They wanted those pink out shirts. They wanted these, you know, kind of bold classic logos, vintage logos. They wanted team apparel. So that just kind of reiterated what athletic staff already knew we wanted to do those things, but it really helped tell the story to campus about why we wanted to expand the licensing efforts. And then be able to connect with retailers as well.
Great points. The next question is from Shelley to Ashlee. Having been in a unique position to have overseen both licensing and the business office, what do you think you did best in that capacity, and what would you have done differently?
I think probably best was realize I knew nothing and I was very honest about it. Like, sometimes people kind of try to fake it, right? You're like, oh, I gotta prove that I can do this. And I took the approach of, look, I know nothing, can you help me? And that really, really worked out with everybody that I got connected with, because they were just so kind and so helpful. They really broke it down for me. If you come in kind of sort of faking that you know stuff, then people are going to assume you know, and they'll skip over some things that might have been really important, but they thought you knew. So making sure that kind of just be honest about where you're at, even if it's just what, you know, athletics was able to do at Providence. There was some things that we knew we weren't going to be able to do that first or second year, and we were just really honest about it amongst our staff. Like, look, it's way too far gone for the basketball apparel to be on in the bookstore. It's just not going to happen. Now, it wasn't the answer people wanted, but we were honest about it. So those expectations were set. It's not going to happen this year. The focus is next year. So I think that was really important. And then I think just asking a little bit sooner when I connected, like, I didn't even realize like how CLC and Fanatics fit together and the bookstore and who was selling what. So just kind of early on, I wish I would have gotten in touch with the right people, you know, maybe 6 months before I did, we could have moved a little faster than we ended up being able to. So that was a little bit of miss on my part, just not realizing how much goes into this. You know, I think I was very naive to think what you all do on the licensing side, and understanding all the bits of it took longer than I expected. and I still don't, I probably know, 25% of what you all do right now and learn more today as well. So thanks for, sharing everything that the presenters did.
Perfect. For Kimberly and Greg, outside of NFTs, what licensing opportunities are in conversation in the world of metaverse?
I would say, I mean, honestly, the big thing right now is NIL, co-branded merchandise. I don't think the revenue is where we all expected it to be, or maybe where the public expected it to be, but I do see that still kind of an ongoing theme of more co-branded merchandise, expanding to more sports. I think the most popular is probably the Fanatics jersey program, and that was only in their Fleeting Tees program. That was only for 6 of the sports, but I do feel like that's going to probably expand in the near future. And 2 is I think there's more comes from EA Sports and the Madden game, so that eventually, hopefully, will be coming out. But I also do see a bigger step into more customization option for video games, and including college products, so beyond just sports, right? So if you're I'll use Halo as an example. I don't know what's current, but Halo as an example, right? You can decorate skins and stuff to suit your guys up. If you maybe there's a college, an option to have your college logo on there too, for those team, for those EA competitive matchups when they're doing it by school. But Kimberly, anything else you think about outside of that?
Not really. I mean, NIL and EA Sports were the first 2 things that came to mind. And that's, that's been a big focus for us. So nothing really to add.
Well, great questions, everybody. If you had more questions, feel free to reach out to any of the people on the call. I'm going to kick it over to Tim to close us out.
Right. I saw one question in there about how we served all the various customers and everybody through the process here at Minnesota. So just quickly, kind of one misconception about the process that we had went through was, that you're super limiting on your licensees, and we still have close to 60 licensees. So that's they're called ADLs. So that process is, critical. But anyway, I know we're at time. So I want to thank everybody for joining today, both organizations. It's awesome to have everybody together. And I also want to thank everyone that was part of the panel. So great job, everyone with that. Everyone sign up for the NACTA convention for your affiliation. And then we have some quick homework as we part ways today. So the business office, I want you to find out who are your top 5 licensees, your top 5 retailers, and for extra credit, go out and meet your campus bookstore director and the campus office that oversees the use of marks and logos. Licensing, I want you to find out where your budget, your athletics budget ranks within your conference. What are your top 3 revenue buckets, and what are your top 3 expense categories? And then extra credit on the licensing side is to grow revenue. And lastly, set up a lunch between your business office and licensing offices to get to know each other and figure out how you can support each other. And that's it.
Can we
Thank
go
you.
back to the contact slide?
Oh,
Someone
yeah.
has to see that.
Thank you.
Screenshot that.
Thanks. Thank you. This old dog appreciates it. Thank you so much. Learn some new tricks.